Hey folks, it's Mayo here, and I wanted to take a little bit more time to talk about the production stack, everything I did for IEM Katowice, maybe do a little bit of a deeper dive than I did in that really horrible phone video setup that I had the day before Katowice happened. So we're going to talk about what I do in OBS, we're going to talk about the different filters I use, the different scene transitions, how I make that work, and also about the scripts that I wrote and how I integrate it with my Stream Deck, everything else that makes this work the way it did. But before we do that, I'd like to remind you of a couple things. First and foremost, I upload content like this, casts, whole bunch of different stuff, highlight videos to my YouTube. This is where you're watching it right now. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, as the thing says. And also, I stream on Twitch every Monday for EPT NA, maybe Europe, and every Saturday for the Apprentice Cup and EPT KR. Other stuff as it happens. So check out the link right there. Make sure to go check me out. But now let's get into that production stack just a little bit because honestly, I'm kind of proud of it and I want to show it off. So we're going to start talking about what exactly it is that I do for IEM Katowice. So you can see a couple things. Hey, look, my webcam is not here. Apologies. I'm not going to be looking at camera the entire time because I'm showing things off. But anyways, this is a scene that you all are very familiar with. This is where Steadfast and I would hang out every time that we were out of game and we were not on break, which was a lot of time, although breaks were, of course, longer. But the one thing that I should point out is you'll notice here we go to filters, and we pop filters up. Let's make this a little bit bigger so people can see what's happening. I have these left name in, left name out filters. And you might say, hey, Babe, what's this? Well, I use something called a move transition, a move source to allow me to fly these in and out. So a lot of the things that move for the broadcast are timed out via things on my Stream Deck. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But this one, I know when things are going to happen. I always want this to fly in 3,000 milliseconds or 3 seconds after the scene starts. So it's going to go in. You can see 3,000 milliseconds here, and it says, okay. So when we fly in, it's just this. You can see the scenario. Our names are here. It's fine. And then pretty briefly, 2 seconds afterwards, we just enable these two sources. And these are timed in. In fact, they're going to show up. And then our names fly in. Small bit of production value, small bit of extra nicety, but it does make a difference, I think. It adds to how dynamic the broadcast was. But that's the only really interesting thing that is happening in this scene. The other thing we can talk about is the fact that Steadfast is a browser source from something called video.ninja. But that's not all that interesting. That's just how I pulled his audio or his video in. Because with Discord, if you don't have Discord as a focused window, it'll freeze the video. Not all that great. And I only have 2 monitors, so that doesn't really work out as well as you would like. But okay, that's out of game. That one is pretty obvious. But out of game also feeds into the reporter scene. You may have seen when we had Vitamin, when we had the Ryung interview, the Vitamin interviews, things like that. And that one also, that's something that is more directly on the Stream Deck. I have a toggle that goes between this scene that you can see right here and this scene down below. And in fact, we're just going to click on it instead of using Stream Deck, and we're going to say, oh, wow, there is our reporter again. This is something very simple, same idea, but the difference is instead of there being a bunch of filters on that to fly names in, instead we have this move transition down here. And you can see it set up. And effectively what it does, I didn't really this is almost all default settings, but what it does is it says, okay, there are sources that are the same in these 2 scenes, namely the Steadfast group and the Beowulf group. All right, so you can see me and you can see Steadfast down below. These are the same sources. So it's going to move things from the out of game ticker, these positions, down to the scaling and position where it is in the actual reporter broadcast. And of course, because our reporter is not there, it's going to fly in. And again, I did use video.ninja to read his audio and video in this case, actually. And he just called it on his phone. It worked really well. We only got this set up 24 hours, I think, before day 1 of Katowice. I managed to convince Matt that it would be a good idea because I realized that Vitamin would actually be on scene. So we could use it for this. And I think it worked out really well. Let me know in the comments how you felt about it, if you saw it. If not, make sure to go back. My body Ryung, my soul Maru was a great moment. A great highlight there for Ryung as he qualified for the round of 12. But now let's talk about what happens in game, because that's also rather useful, right? That's where we spent the majority of our time. And honestly, there's not a lot here. In fact, we're not going to see most of the stuff that would show up anyways, because this was all timed to a Stream Deck button that said, okay, I'm going to 30 seconds in, and well, actually, yeah, let's just pull up the overlay for this right now. So when we go to in-game, we play music. Of course, you remember the music would start. This just happens automatically. We actually mute the game audio first and foremost, which is important because there's nothing more awkward than being in game, or quote unquote being in game, and having the game sounds when other audio is playing over it. It just gets really jarring. So we turn the game audio off. We play the intro music, and then we delay for a while, 60 seconds, because we don't want this the sponsor setup. You can see it right here. We don't want the sponsor rotator to actually go and show up, because in the first 60 seconds we're having player name splashes go in, things like that. We really don't want that. So we do that, and then it just fades in. Simple, easy. The other thing though is we call a bunch of filters. In the out of game ticker, we have it timed to 2,000 seconds, and this one, it's more designed to be in sync with the Stream Deck setup. So after that 60 seconds, the sponsor filters, they go in. So I'm not going to go hit this right here because we don't need to. We can just pull the filter up. But if you remember the Intel fly-ins and the Shopify fly-ins, as you can see right here, that was what controlled that. So it would go on, it would be in for 2 seconds, it would fly out. We also had these group A, B, C, D fly-ins, and I had those set up. We didn't actually end up using them. They weren't super useful to the broadcast because we were out of game so much talking about the group setup that we really didn't need it. And in doing so, I just deleted them because they were making very occasional dropped frames. Just too many assets in the scene. So we got rid of that. Another thing that you all may have noticed, and this actually gets into the scripting a little bit more, and we'll talk about that later. We have this setup right here that gives us the head-to-head of the players. Now, unfortunately, the stats actually didn't work out all that well during Katowice, because you can see the 1, 2, 5, and 7. These numbers are 1 and 2 versus Terran, 5 and 7 versus Terran. These numbers are pulled from Eligulac, but what I didn't know is that Eligulac was not real-time updating things. So instead, what would happen was we had these players play, and it would say 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, unless they played the play-ins, and then the next day, it would be updated, and you're fine, but by then, they're not playing again until the playoffs, where the broadcast is not there. And maybe next time, I'm just going to pull the current form against each race. I think that is probably more useful. But this is where we get to start to talk about the scripting that I did for this. So you see down here, I have 3 assets. And I mean, there's the animation. But, I mean, we turn that off. The animation just makes things look snazzy. But this is where things get a little bit fun. So we have this head-to-head background that is the box, the race logos, it says head-to-head, all that fun stuff. This is something that ESL gave to us. I edited a little bit to get this box right here, but that's not all that important. But this transparency is actually real-time generated by the script that I made. So it positions Estrella and Creator as they need to be, pulls from Eligulac the lifetime head-to-head data in Legacy of the Void, and also their record in the tournament, figures out what race they are, does all of this different stuff. So we get these nice, fancy head-to-head assets. Unfortunately, we didn't end up using this all that much because we were not given a ton of time between, hey, the players are going to be ready, and, oh, hey, you actually need to go, which was unfortunate, but so it goes. I still think it worked out pretty well. The one issue was I had to try to center these, and unfortunately, not all players were totally centered in the image, so Scarlet's one in particular was a little bit weird, as she was kind of off-center from the bar, but most of these it worked out pretty well. And then there's the other thing that I am actually rather proud of, as we're going to go to break highlights. So we're going to go here. This has footage from my most recent EPT cast. And if you want to take a look at actually this series, Keen versus Clem, that is available on the YouTube right now. But we had a 2-tiered break screen setup. Again, if you saw this happening, you'll know how it works, but B, you'll remember it. So the ticker is set up, and the ticker is something that is also pulled out of the script. We'll talk about how exactly that happens later. But for now, all you need to know is that OBS is reading this from a text file that then puts into the ticker, with a scrolling filter applied, as you can see, and that just makes it go where it needs to. That is the width of this ticker bar. Pretty simple. There's a countdown, sure. But so this would go, and the way I was doing this is I was using the replay buffer to live capture any important things. So highlights of the series, I'd press it, the last 20 seconds would get saved. But unfortunately, the way OBS does this, you'll see this is saved in this instant replay playlist. The way OBS does this is they never update the VLC media source, which is what this playlist is. They'll say, okay, well, whatever you store there is going to be what's stored in memory, and it's fine, and we're never updating. So I had to go find a way to make that happen. I used to have to go and manually update this, which was terrible. But then I found a script. This is going to be the common theme of things. I have a script that goes and says, when we go to the out-of-game scene, which we're always going to do, update the playlist here. Pull everything from the folder that all the highlights get saved to, and go from there. So I have another button on my Stream Deck, as we can see right here, that says delete replays. And in fact, this doesn't delete replays. This is a holdover from another setup that I have. But this would copy all of the movies, all of the little clips, in the instant replay folder into a saving folder that I can use for highlights later on, that I could use to tweet, things like that, not have to worry about losing it. Of course, other assets that we had here in OBS, not too much more. The other thing, of course, we talked about that move transition. Same idea to move into our, we're out of highlights setup. And by the way, this last match, this overlay, these are, again, also generated by the script that I made. So again, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. The other only interesting thing, really, we can talk, the only other interesting thing, I also made group highlights. You can see this. Actually, I don't think we actually used this, but this was a day and group standings setup. And as you can see, I didn't fully use it. It never updated to Group B. And I don't think we ever showed this on stream, but this was there. I kind of forgot about it. Looking back on it, I think it's still valuable. I think my mistake was not using it rather than creating it. But anyways, there is that. And then the other interesting thing, we do use an advanced scene switcher to figure out when to go from the instant replay playlist to the full this background rotating globe setup. So it says, okay, well, when the playlist is done, move. Not all that simple, or not all that complicated. The other thing is we want to make sure that the intro video transitions when it needs to. That's not something I manually want to be doing. So same idea on a media setup. It says, okay, when the source is about 6 seconds left, because that video, it ends with, it has like 10 seconds of just hanging there. So with about 6 seconds left, move to the out of game ticker. That gives me a good idea so I can count steadfast in. It works pretty dang well. But there's only one other thing to, actually, I guess 2 things to talk about. The other big thing to talk about is the scripting, are these tools that I made. Let's talk about the scripting that I use. So you can see there's a lot of lines of code here. We don't need to talk about it too much, but suffice to say, the way this works is I built this little GUI that really powered the majority of things. ESL gave me this spreadsheet that I will not show you because I think it's technically public, but I don't want to get in trouble with ESL. Again, I'd like to get rehired. That seems useful, but this pulls from the Google Docs setup. So I have a setup there. It allows me to perform my API calls. It's great. And what this does, this generates all the graphics that you see that are dynamically generated and the variable tickers. So for instance, if we have, you see those head-to-heads, that is actually used in 2 ways. First and foremost, it generates the head-to-head image. Second, it generates the race image overlay that we use for the break screen. So say we want to see what Estrella and Clem look like. So we're going to generate the head-to-head. This takes a little bit because I need to modulate my API calls. They can't come too fast or Google gets mad at me, but eventually this is going to solve. That doesn't need to be too fast. And then that gets placed in this broadcast image setup where we can say, okay, head-to-head. Look at that. It is Clem. It is Estrella. We can see what they've done. And if you remember from OBS, you can see how this is set up. So that's the simple thing. That is just pulling from ELAC, placing data, getting proper names, getting races, doing all of that. But this does more. This tool does a lot more than just that. You can see these recap images. If you want to see what they look like, well, we can take a look here. Actually, that's not the right image. There we go. There's a fly-in. So they were going to go down here, and there was another underlay, like what I've done for everything else that goes in with it. So this was just live updating the groups. I never used it, so we can forget about it. But suffice to say, it is there, and it was something that I could have done. The big thing that this thing does is it generates my tickers for me. And so the way this ticker works, it generates this results.txt file that we can see right here that is giving me the results for the day. So here what we can see is actually groups C and D. of the ticker going through right here. And this actually is a little bit more complicated, not for the groups or not for the play-ins, because that's just reading from the bracket and only keeping, I want to say 10 results in there so it doesn't just get tediously long. But when we look at this build round of 24 assets, which, by the way, if you write code, don't yell at me. It's needlessly bloated, but I was writing code for speed, not efficiency. But what this does, actually, there's a whole bunch of logic here that says, okay, I want to make sure that I have no more than, I believe I had it at 10, maybe it was 15, total results, which seems fine, but I'm working from 2 different group setups each day, and I have to intelligently add on some number into the upcoming and some number from the matches that have actually been played onto both sides. So when we're getting to the end of Group A and there are only 3 matches remaining, I want 3 matches from Group B to show up as well and things to get bumped off as they get played. So that was a little bit annoying just to figure out the logic for that because it was a really awkward data set. It was straight up, we had one table that was Group A and then one table next to it that was Group B and then so on and so forth. And I pulled it all from Excel and had to make that happen. So kind of annoying, but we made it work. And honestly, I mean, there's a lot more to it. These are all threaded, which cool, whatever. There is some logic to pull from a Legulac. You can see you get a Legulac data, so that gives me the versus race matchups for every race, and also their head-to-head, things like that. Some logic to figure out whether the image exists so we can put them in where they need to be, things like that. But in general, it was a lot of work, but it doesn't actually need to show a lot on screen. This was fully custom for IEM Katowice. I built it off the stuff I did for King of Battles, and I built it off the stuff that I have for my own stream. But this was, at its core, custom for King of Battles, custom for IEM Katowice, custom for every tournament that I'm contracted to actually do everything for. It's a lot different to just be, hey, go cast. But for where I'm running production, I'm doing all that. That is the level of work I do put into that. One last thing we can talk about, and we're going to pull up the stream deck just a little bit. Of course, I use some plugins to do things like using my replay buffer, but everything else there is pretty simple. We have this toggle that just says, hey, go to reporter scene. Don't go to reporter scene. Fairly simple. These are actually just a set of hotkeys, shift tilde and control tilde, so we can get the fly-ins and fly-outs. I could have done without this, honestly, but the way it worked really was I wanted to have the words that would remind me which player was flying in, and I already made a couple mistakes there. So it's fine. And the rest of these, not all that interesting. I do have a folder that is all the fly-ins that I did not end up... I think I used it once in day 2, and that was about it. That's my production stack. Of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Tell me what you think. Any advice, question, comments, concerns, worries, as my 5th grade English teacher used to say. But for now, folks, thanks so much for watching. Catch you next time. Make sure, again, check me out on Twitch. Watch the rest of my stuff here on YouTube. Take care now.